Hewitt Docks, Lifts, and Pontoon Legs began in a small south-central Minnesota town with a mission to make dock install and removal easier by inventing the Rolladock. Well, now the company has evolved to provide everything you might need to improve your lake time. In addition to the classic Rolladock or the new Ultra Dock system, Hewitt offers all-terrain staircases, gangways, canopies, and lifts, along with any accessory you might need. Celebrate 50 years of business with us. Go to HewittRad.com to enter for a chance to win a free dock and monthly prizes. Hewitt Docks, Lifts, and Pontoon Legs. Work hard, play harder. You deserve a Hewitt.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Minnesota Bound podcast, the stories behind the stories. I'm Laura Schara, your host for today, and I'm looking forward to chatting with Inga From. She founded her own business called Positive Gun Dogs, and she is offering a resource for those looking for an alternative to traditional training methods for gun dog work and field sports. Inga, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, it's great to be here today.
Well, thank you for joining us. I look forward to chatting with you about your slightly different approach to more of a traditional training methods that are traditionally used. And how did you get into dog training?
That's a long story. So it's where do you start with that, right? You know,
were you around dogs as a young woman? Of course, you're an outdoors woman and an upland field hunter yourself. Yeah. So is that where it started? Is your childhood?
Yeah, I've had dogs, being raised with dogs as far back as I remember, but I didn't think about getting into this as a career. I worked at a vet clinic in college thinking, this is just something that I do part-time, and then ended up working at a PetSmart part-time while I was pursuing, kind of my career choice at the time. Sure. And just started out that way, just for fun, just doing dog training for fun. I didn't actually think that it would end up completely switching careers over into this realm at all.
And what were you doing? What was your other career before you got into dog training?
Yeah, I went to school for law enforcement. So I ended up being a game warden in the state of Texas. And so completely different area. When I moved back to Minnesota, I had to decide, which route I was going to take. And I really loved working with dogs. I just didn't think that you could make a career out of it. So I ended up at a local animal shelter, and I did a mentorship under somebody there, and then ended up at the Minnesota Valley Humane Society as their behavior expert for 5 years.
Very cool. And so when you decided that you were going to get into dog training as a career, which I love, because I love working with dogs too. When I was little, I would compete in obedience and 4-H with, our dogs. And I was always out in the backyard messing around with the hunting dogs and the labs that we had. And I am very passionate about dog training. And I think, of course, as we know, a lot of it's more working with the humans than it is the dogs and on how to speak the dog's language. But it's so fun to see the transition in dogs, and also they're such great students. So when you decided that you wanted to get into training in relation to gun dogs and field dogs, but you wanted to approach it through a different method, what was your, I guess your reasoning behind that? And then we'll get into what your actual method is. But
Sure.
Why you chose a slightly different approach.
Sure. Well, just like you, I was in 4-H. So I learned dog training when I was a kid in 4-H. And it was very, traditional training. And then, through the years when I ended up being a trainer at the Humane Society, I learned a different type of training, which is based on motivation and reward-based training, which was quite new to me. And so learning that, I was able to use that with the shelter dogs and working with the shelter dogs to help them become more adoptable. And so we ended up starting Positive Gun Dogs of Minnesota because there was a trainer at the time, I think the only trainer at the time, this is back in 2006, that was teaching positive reinforcement training for gun dogs. And he was on the East Coast His name is Jim Barry. He is now retired. I just decided, you know what, this would be really cool to try to learn positive reinforcement training with field dogs. So I went out to the East Coast and took a workshop with him.
Very cool. And what is the approach when you say reward-based training? What does that mean for our listeners?
Yeah. So it's basically taking a lot of the natural instincts of the dog and then also working with what motivates them. So dogs are motivated by things that the same like people. People don't work very well without motivation anyway, by the way. But dogs same thing. So they work for different things. Whether it be food rewards, whether it be play rewards. So play rewards could be things like tug or fetch, or I guess in the gun dog world we call fun bumpers.
Yes.
Or just simply retrieving or doing what they were bred to do. So if we're looking at, field dogs, a lot of these dogs nowadays live in family homes with people that may not necessarily be doing things with them that they were bred to do.
That's
and
correct.
that can cause problems, behavioral problems.
No, you're absolutely right. If a dog is not mentally stimulated specifically, you hear that a lot with huskies, and specifically that if you are not stimulating not only the physical side, but also the mental side of their brain of what they were traditionally bred for, they will be very destructive in your home. And then a lot of people have a tendency to blame the dog when really it's a lot of times, in my opinion, the human's fault for not really engaging with their dog needs. It's so important when you buy a dog that you are conscious of stimulating and making sure their needs are met as much as they meet yours, of being in the house and being your snuggle buddy or whatever, that you are also responsible for meeting their needs too.
Yep, absolutely. So positive reinforcement training with gun dogs is pretty rare. I think mostly because people just don't know how to apply it. It's like any dog sport. You have to learn the techniques for how to apply it in any given different dog sports that are out there. So if you think, okay, it's like you said with a husky, what were they bred for? What would they be good at? The majority of my clients are sporting breed dogs, but they're, given that I also teach field sports. So field sports can include things like working with a sporting breed dog that I'm never going to take hunting, but I wanted to do something that's similar to that to meet that dog's needs.
Sure.
So it could include like shed dog hunting or the mushroom hunting or whatever else.
Very cool. So when you are specifically saying, positive, what are some of the methods that you use for positive gun dog training? If we want to break it down into, for instance, how about just you hear force fetching. How do you apply that sort of training method to the positive method?
Yeah, so we don't, in positive reinforcement training, we don't need to use the force fetch. We use something that's alternative. I could use something that I call clicker training. So I would be using a clicker, which is what we call a bridge marker. And that's like a communication symbol to the dog. It tells the dog, when you hear this, you did exactly what I want you to do, and you're going to get rewarded for that. So say I was working on something like retrieve, I might start with the last behavior of that sequence. And in a retrieve, we're looking at maybe holding the item in the mouth. So I have the dog sitting in front of me. I have my clicker. I may have my bumper or something like that. And I'm working on just having the dog hold the item. And then I'm clicking, and then I'm offering a reward. So that could be food reward or play reward or whatever it is that's motivating the dog. And then I'm building up on that. And so we think of it as a behavior chain. So in a retrieve, there's multiple behaviors, not just one. So you have to work on each piece of the chain separately. So the last thing I do what we call back chaining, which is the last item. So that's the hold. And then we may work on picking up, and then we may work on picking up from a distance, building kind of drive. But that gives you a good idea of how we would do it a little bit differently.
Oh, interesting. So does this also apply as the field dogs get more advanced into blind retrieves and things like that? Does this approach still work for that typically?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So when we're using a different methodology for training, it's really hard to plug into a different system. So you have to almost think about it as a completely new system and how we work things. So if I'm working on my retrieving skills, I'm actually going to be working on blind retrieves first, and which is a very different approach than you think of with traditional training. And
Oh,
I'm going to
interesting.
work a lot more with scent work and the natural abilities of the dog. So is it better that I start working with the puppies from the time they're 8 weeks old? Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Now, do you find, I've got so many questions for you. Do you find that, does this type of training require, I know all dog training requires patience, and sometimes that's where people, I think, fail a lot, is if, it takes a lot of patience and they lose patience, and then you're kind of going backwards. But do you feel like this
Sure.
type of training requires a little bit more patience, or does it take a longer time to get to the same point of where you want your field dog at?
I think it's all about expectations, right?
Sure.
And what you're going to be doing with your dog. If this is something that I'm going to be doing with competition, it's a completely different ball game than is this something that I want to do with my dog for recreational hunting? Or is it just, I have a sporting breed dog and I want to teach them some field sports or some field skills. So it's all about the expectations. And then also teaching the owner to work with their dog. There's nothing like a relationship between the dog and their owner. And that's the hard part, Laura, is
Yep.
teaching the people, because I don't take dogs and train them for people. And that's always hard because I think traditionally, any kind of field sports, it's a tradition that the dog would go away to be trained, whereas I'm
Yes.
working more with the owner, and that's frustrating.
I bet that's challenging at times, for sure. And I think I agree with you. That is a really solid method, because as much as, when you send your dog away and they go to some wonderful places and they get a lot of skill when they come back, if you don't have the skill yourself to understand how the dog was trained, or what the dog knows or doesn't know, and really be consistent, I think then you see the regression of the dog. And then you see people who are frustrated in the field, or they're yelling at their dogs. The dog's too far out in front of them. And, it is a very interesting relationship. So I 100% could see how training the person and the dog together with you would be super beneficial. But at the same time, it probably adds a lot more challenges, because I always feel like the
Mhm.
humans have more challenges in the training than the dogs do.
Yep, that is correct. That's correct. But it's a lot of fun. Positive reinforcement training is a lot of fun. The worst thing that happens is they just don't get the reward. So sometimes if your timing is off, the dogs can be a little bit frustrating. And then, we have to teach the client, okay, you got to get better at timing. You got to get better at learning the process. So yeah, can it take a little bit longer? Yes and no. Like I said, it just depends on expectations. Sometimes I
Sure.
can teach a dog rather quickly if I'm doing it myself.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Where do you feel that, if you're giving tips on just general obedience, where do you think humans make the most mistakes?
I think they don't spend enough time with their dogs.
Yeah.
And they don't understand the breed or breed mix tendencies. And we've really lost that, I think, within the last couple of years, that relationship with we have and understanding our dog's needs. Um, you know, Making sure that the dogs have, boundaries in training would include that relationship. So if, I'm gone 8 to 10 hours a day and I'm letting my dog out of the kennel, or, I'm coming home and they're like, gosh, this dog is really annoying me. Thinking about, maybe that might be my fault.
Exactly.
Am I exercising them mentally and physically? Did I
True.
get a Sheltie and I can't stand barking? That was probably not the
Your
best breed
fault.
fit for me.
Exactly. I do see that that the expectation of the dog's behavior is kind of skewed, because when you don't fulfill the dog's needs, you do have behaviors that you don't necessarily love, and you start blaming the dog, when in fact it really is your fault. And two, that people just assume that if they have a fenced in backyard, and then you have a German short hair pointer, that, well, I have a backyard. The dog can run around the backyard. That is basically putting your dog into a fishbowl or you into a fishbowl or a 5x5 room for the rest of your life. Like they're so bred to use their nose and get out and run that you owe it to the dog, you know, if you want the behavior that you are looking for, you know, that you get that. So, very.
I hear that a lot from my clients. They have a big backyard.
Yeah, exactly. Well, once they smell that about 2 times, they're already over it. Like they want something else to use their nose and hunt down or whatever else. And, you know, I have a French bulldog. I don't have a field dog. And that is, yes, a Frenchie. They're a funny breed. They are super stubborn and they're really independent thinkers and they're not bred to be people pleasing dogs. They're not a working breed. And my dad, it's funny, you know, he has had labs, of course, his whole life, including all the ravens. And, you know, he is sometimes baffled at, he'll have Bacon. He might dog sit occasionally my parents and Bacon will be in their backyard and he'll tell him to come and Bacon will just sit and stare at him. He doesn't run away. He just stares. And he's like, you need to teach your dog, you know, recall or whatever. I'm like, you realize, I mean, he is, but he's going to think about it for about 3 minutes and then he will run back to you. But he thinks it's just so bizarre. But that's been an interesting, you know, I grew up with labs and again, was so used to the people pleasing dog and having really good, of course, exercise, discipline, affection type of format. That's fortunately, my dad had a lot of that great foundation for us as girls growing up with the dogs and making sure they weren't like, you know, jumping all over us and stuff. But going to the French bulldog has been an interesting switch, but also it's been great for me in learning how to communicate differently with expectations. And at the same time, sometimes I think he gets away with murder because he's still a little bit too stubborn than he should be. But that is, when you're researching breeds and I knew for myself with my schedule that I wouldn't be able to fulfill the dog's needs, you know, for as much as if I'm going hunting a couple times in the fall, bird hunting, just with my travel schedule and everything else that I do, I just didn't have the time to give to the dog what the dog needed. And that's why I, at this point in my life, still don't have a gun dog. And I love them. I think they're fabulous, but I would feel bad. So, you know, I chose the French bulldog breed because they need, you know, a good 20-minute walk, you know, twice a day. And we do that every single day. So, but yes, we need more dog trainers out in the world, really training humans more than the dogs. But so I think the work that you're doing is really fantastic. And I know you also have classes and things do you do just straight obedience group classes, or do people have to work with you just one-on-one? How does your format work?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I primarily focus on serious behavior cases. So working with the field dogs is something that I do for fun. Because behavior cases can get exhausting.
Sure.
But so I deal with fears, phobias, anxiety, reactive dogs. It's very common that people will have dogs that react to other dogs on leash, on walks, and things like that. So I primarily focus on that because I have 2 businesses and my other one focuses on behavioral health of dogs and cats. So I do a lot of dog introductions to cats as well.
Cool.
That's my a lot of my time is spent helping people with dogs that really need some serious behavior help.
Can we stop for a second and talk about because this is going to be so handy for so many people, when the leash aggression.
Yeah.
And so I, of course, take my dog for a lot of walks and I see this all the time where people, they don't correct their dogs when they are having some sort of outburst on the leash, or to get them to at least calm down and not go to zone 9 or, you know, the red zone or whatever. But also you see on the opposite side of that, if they know their dog's going to react, what they do is they just drag the dog away and cross the street, or then the person themselves is in fear of what the dog's reaction is going to be, versus my approach is I want my dog to make the mistake so I can make the correction so they learn. Otherwise, your dog never learns, right? So What is your approach on some of the leash aggression? Because you just see this everywhere with all dogs.
Yeah. Well, it's more common in the United States. I did study some dogs overseas, and what I noticed is this is a common problem in the US. The reason it is because our dogs are more confined. We have leash laws, so if you're in the city, they're always on a leash. They're very rarely off a leash. If you talk to, say, your grandparents or people that lived outside of the city, you very rarely had dogs that had issues on leash. So if you think about that, if there were farm dogs, they were always off doing chores, off leash.
Sure.
Okay. The dogs were just off leash all the time. They got used to that. And certain other countries are like this too. Say you go to Ireland, you might be in the pub and then there's the dog off the leash.
Yeah.
So this has really become an issue in the United States over the past, I would say a couple decades, because we've created this problem where the dogs aren't allowed to greet anymore. They don't know how to greet. They don't know how to behave appropriate off a leash because their owners don't even know, hey, that was a good idea to teach boundaries. And so I always start puppies off on teaching boundaries of the yard and things like that. But people don't know how to do these techniques anymore. So we've really created the problem. So when dogs are seeing other dogs, it's oftentimes, not always, dogs that are overly frustrated because they're used to getting to be able to greet dogs whenever they want. And so they don't know how to behave appropriately. So it turns into frustration, may lead to aggression. So think about it as like you were saying, that's 1 to 10 zone, right?
Yep.
So some dogs see other dogs and they go, ruff, 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 that's so exciting. And then that's it. Where other dogs, they've learned, I can never greet the other dog. I'm so frustrated. And now I'm turning into barking and snarling. And that issue only happens on the leash. So these dogs may be fine off a leash. They may be fine at like a doggy daycare or a dog park. And so thinking about like, how can we not create those problems in the first place? So teaching especially if you get a puppy, teaching proper socialization, proper like on leash and off leash handling skills. So it's more than just the problem itself addressing. It kind of goes back to all that stuff I just talked about.
The Schara family enjoys spending a lot of time outside. Hence, we care what goes into our environment. That's why we support propane, the energy for everyone. Did you know that propane produces fewer greenhouse gas emissions than electricity generated on the U.S. grid? Propane's emissions are 43% fewer. That's a lot. Propane is clean, dependable, and affordable. Plus, it's produced right here in the USA. Let's all do our part to reduce emissions from our homes, cabins, and businesses by choosing propane, the right energy right now. To learn more about propane, the energy for everyone, go to propane.com.
Hi there, Ron Schara here for Star Bank. If you're putting your money into mega banks down the street, who knows where that money's being used? Bank locally. Keep your money local with a community bank that actually cares about you, your family, your business, and your goals. Check out the bank we use at Minnesota Bound. Try Minnesota's own Star Bank. You can find them online at starbank.net. When you call Star Bank, you actually hear a real living person answering the phone. Star Bank has 10 convenient locations around Minnesota to serve you and all the mobile banking products that you need to manage your money. Check out all that Star Bank has to offer at starbank.net.
Hey, I'm really picky when it comes to my drinking water, and I have the reverse osmosis drinking water system from Connecticut, and I love it. It takes out contaminants in the water, it removes chlorine, and most important, it tastes great, which is the one thing I'm probably most picky on is how does my water taste. So having Connecticut also means that I use less plastic water bottles, which we all know is a definite bonus for our environment. For more information, visit Connecticut.com to find a dealer near you. It's so fascinating. I could talk to you for hours. I see is you go to a dog park and you see the dynamic between dogs and their owners, and then the dogs that have some behavioral issues in the dog park. And, there's so many owners out there that are either clueless or they don't know what to do to correct the problem. So instead they talk to the dog as if the dog speaks English. And they're like, Charlie, don't do that. What are you doing? Stop. thinking that's going to do anything other than, the dog hears a soft, kind voice and it's thinking it's getting praised for the behavior. Or the same thing on the leash when a dog is being, for lack of a better word, like leash aggression or excitement and those types of things where they're like, it's okay, it's okay, it's okay. And they think they're doing a soothing behavior on behalf of their dog when they're actually just feeding it, you're doing a great job.
Yeah,
So,
some of it's where the dog's state of mind is.
sure.
So if the dog's state of mind is in, I use a scale, like in the red zone, like you talked about, the dog's in fight or flight mode. There's not much occurring at that point, and so it's hard to learn. Now, if the dog's in, a arousal state, but it's still excited state, then we can do the work. I always say, like, is your dog in the line to do work?
Sure. Yeah, that's true. Because if they get into a state where they're really in the red zone, then it's almost like their brain isn't even capable of taking in information at the time other than I'm going to fight this or fight it, right?
Yep. Think about two people in a fist fight. Nobody's listening.
Yeah, exactly. That's so true. Well, we have so many more topics we could talk about. Inga, I'm for sure going to have you back on the Minnesota Bound podcast because you also do shed dog hunting training. And in fact, the reason Inga and I have been, even how we met, is I am going to be filming a Minnesota Bound episode with you on your forage and field dog training classes. And for a few years now, I said, there's got to be someone in Minnesota that has been training their dog to hunt morel mushrooms. Someone has got to be doing this. And I couldn't find anybody for years. And I fell upon your page. I'm like, this is it. I found her. So, and I know you have classes coming up this spring. So I want our listeners to be able to jump in on those if they're interested. So just, chat briefly with us about your forage and field dog training classes that you have.
Yeah, this is super exciting. People, the morel mushroom, Minnesota, the morel mushroom is it.
Like gold.
I mean, people, yeah, they really love it. I got into teaching this because I went to teach a positive gun dog seminar in Seattle, and the woman that hosted me teaches truffle hunting. And she took me out truffle hunting, and she said, oh, it was so much fun to watch the dogs truffle hunt.
She
said, you can do this. I said, we don't have truffles. She said, Inga, you have morels. I said, oh my gosh, brilliant. So let's do it. Let's do it. So I put the course together, based on what I know about scent work and then what I know about field dogs. There's lots of people that love to do what we call nose work with their dogs. It's a sport. But because I want something useful, so I want to get a bounty with my dog when I'm in the field. So teaching my dog to find morel mushrooms is a lot of fun. So that's what we're focusing on in this introduction class. I call it forage and field dog class because the intro class is morels. So we teach the dogs to find the morel mushroom, to locate it, what we call an indication, and then we're able to collect our harvest from that. And then if they continue the class or if they want to continue beyond the introduction, we can focus on other mushrooms that we find here in Minnesota.
That is so cool. I can tell you that class is going to take off because those people that hunt for morel mushrooms know how difficult it is to, really find them with the naked eye. And when you have a dog with a nose that's a million times better than yours that can go find them probably in record speed, my goodness, watch out.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun. Yeah, we've got a couple classes coming up. They're actually filling up really fast, and the first one's full now. And so I've got a second class, and the information's on the website for sign up for that. And then I do have a remote class. Website. Yeah, it's positivegundogsmn.com.
Perfect.
Yeah,
and what did you say again?
Oh, we have a remote class. So I've got somebody joining from Duluth or different parts that maybe they can't make it to Bloomington for an in-person class. So we do teach a remote class as well.
Awesome. Well, I have to tell you, Minnesota Bound and myself were very excited to film your class in May. And then we're going to meet up again to watch all the students, the dog students, do their thing later in May when when the mushrooms start popping. That's the thing with those morels. Like
Yep.
when you get the day, you got to go. When you get the calling, you got to go because it's a few short hours, because when people are out there and they find their spots, those mushrooms are gone.
Yep. Yep. That is true.
Awesome. Well, Inga, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast today. Again, you are a wealth of information. I am excited to have you back on the podcast. We're going to continue this conversation with, positive gun dog training, including some of the other things you do with shed dog training. And also we'll kind of deep dive into the forage and field dog classes once we film that for Minnesota Bound. We'd love to have you back on again to chat about that, because I tell you, there are so many people that love their dogs deeply, and they want to have, the best canine companion that they can. And always working on your skills as a human, companion to your dog, so that you can be a better dog parent is imperative to a good relationship. So
Excellent.
keep up the great work.
Thanks for having me on today.
Awesome. Thank you. And once again, thank you to our sponsors, Minnesota Propane, Hewitt Docks, Connecticut, and Star Bank. And last but not least, don't forget to introduce a kid to the great outdoors.